July 10, 1940, Tangmere Aerodrome, Sussex. Flight Lieutenant David Moore watched German bombers materialize through broken cloud, their engines droning like distant thunder. He pushed the throttle forward, his Hurricane shuddered, then surged toward the enemy formation. Around him, 11 more Hurricanes climbed into combat, their fabric-covered fuselages trembling in the slipstream. Above them, somewhere in the brilliant summer sky, Spitfire squadrons tangled with Messerschmitt escorts. Below, the bombers pressed onward, vulnerable and exposed. Moore's squadron attacked from the sun, 8 machine guns per aircraft converging on the Dornier formation. The first burst shredded an engine cowling, the second ignited fuel tanks. Within 90 seconds, 3 German bombers were falling toward the English Channel, trailing smoke and flame. The surviving crews radioed back to France, reporting fierce Spitfire attacks. They were wrong. Not a single Spitfire had touched them. And in that single misidentification lay the seed of Germany's greatest intelligence failure, a mistake that would cost them the Battle of Britain and perhaps the war itself. 2 weeks earlier, in a Berlin briefing room thick with cigarette smoke, Luftwaffe intelligence officers had assembled their assessment of Britain's fighter defenses. Photographs covered every available surface, performance charts lined the walls. At the center of everything stood one aircraft, the Supermarine Spitfire. The analysts had built an impressive dossier. Maximum speed, 365 miles per hour. Climb rate, exceptional. Maneuverability, superior to the Messerschmitt Bf 109 in turning combat. Hermann Göring's staff circled Spitfire production facilities in red ink, marking them for immediate destruction. Castle Bromwich, Southampton, Middle Wallop. The names appeared in targeting orders with obsessive repetition. German fighter pilots returning from early engagements over Dunkirk had spoken of the Spitfire with grudging respect. These combat reports flooded back to Luftwaffe headquarters, creating a singular impression that Britain's entire defensive capability rested on Spitfire wings. Everything about the aircraft suggested modernity, technological superiority, a worthy opponent for the vaunted German fighter arm. Meanwhile, another fighter received barely a footnote. The Hawker Hurricane appeared in reconnaissance photographs clearly enough a stubby aircraft with fabric-covered fuselage, looking positively archaic beside the all-metal Spitfire. Luftwaffe analysts classified it as interim technology, a stopgap design Britain would phase out once Spitfire production met demand. After all, how dangerous could an airplane covered in painted fabric possibly be? Modern air warfare demanded modern aircraft, all-metal construction, stressed skin, advanced aerodynamics. The Hurricane, with its outdated design philosophy, clearly belonged to an earlier era. German intelligence filed it under secondary threats and moved on. British propaganda cheerfully reinforced this misconception. Newspapers celebrated Spitfire victories with dramatic headlines. Newsreels showed Spitfires scrambling while stirring music played. When German intelligence intercepted British communications and newspapers throughout 1940, they found endless Spitfire references. The Hurricane rarely received similar attention. From Berlin's perspective, this confirmed their analysis. Britain clearly valued Spitfires above all else. Therefore, Spitfires must represent the primary threat. What German intelligence failed to grasp was the sheer scale of Hurricane deployment. While they obsessed over destroying 19 Spitfire squadrons, 32 Hurricane squadrons were quietly positioning themselves across southern England. Air Chief Marshal Dowding reviewed Fighter Command's actual disposition. The numbers told a story Berlin refused to read. 59 operational squadrons stood ready across Britain. 32 flew Hurricanes. 19 flew Spitfires. German intelligence had focused their entire strategic calculus on eliminating roughly one-third of Britain's actual single-engine fighter strength. Production figures revealed the disparity even more dramatically. Hawker Aircraft's manufacturing lines had been producing Hurricanes since late 1937, giving them a 2-year head start. The Hurricane's conventional construction meant more factories could contribute. Gloucester Aircraft built Hurricanes, Austin Motors assembled Hurricanes. Even Canadian Car and Foundry in Montreal had established Hurricane production by early 1940. By August 1940, Hurricane factories delivered 130 aircraft per month. Supermarine managed 70 Spitfires in the same period. Sidney Cam's original design philosophy, create a fighter that ordinary workshops could manufacture, was paying enormous dividends. Supermarine faced entirely different challenges. The Spitfire's stress skin construction required precision manufacturing that couldn't be easily distributed. Each curved panel needed exact shaping. R.J. Mitchell's pursuit of aerodynamic perfection had created an aircraft that was brilliant but difficult to mass-produce. Number 11 Group, defending London and the southeast under Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, operated 15 Hurricane squadrons. Tangmere, Kenley, Biggin Hill, Hornchurch, Norfolk, these weren't secondary positions. These were the most threatened airfields, the ones German bombers would attack repeatedly throughout the coming months. Dowding was deliberately placing his most numerous fighter where it would encounter the most targets. He understood something German intelligence missed entirely. Air combat isn't won solely by having the fastest aircraft, but by having enough effective aircraft in the right places. Training pipelines reinforced this numerical advantage. The Hurricane's forgiving flight characteristics meant new pilots needed roughly 15 hours to feel competent. The Spitfire demanded 20 to 25 hours before pilots felt comfortable. With losses mounting throughout the summer, Hurricane squadrons could absorb replacement pilots faster. What German pilots mocked as primitive construction turned out to be precisely what made the Hurricane devastating. That fabric-covered rear fuselage could absorb cannon shells and machine gun rounds without catastrophic structural failure. Bullets punched clean holes through the doped fabric and passed out the other side. A Spitfire's stressed aluminum skin would tear and buckle under similar punishment. Hurricane pilots routinely landed aircraft with dozens of bullet holes stitched across the fuselage. The damage looked dramatic, but rarely affected flight controls or structural strength. Ground crews would patch the fabric overnight, and the same aircraft would fly combat the next morning. Sidney Cam had designed around a philosophy German engineers found baffling: build it strong, build it simple, build it repairable. The fuselage used a worn truss structure of steel tubes borrowed from biplane construction. Mechanics could repair battle damage quickly, often returning aircraft to service within hours. A damaged long spar could be replaced at squadron level. Compare this to Spitfire repairs, which frequently required factory assistance. But the Hurricane's true genius lay in its gun platform. 8 Browning machine guns, 4 in each wing, converged their fire at 250 yards, creating a devastating cone of bullets. The Hurricane's thick wing section housed these guns close to the fuselage centerline, minimizing the convergence angle. Pilots reported the weapon installation felt remarkably stable. Unlike the Spitfire, where thin wings created noticeable vibration when all 8 guns fired, the Hurricane absorbed the recoil smoothly. This stability proved crucial when attacking bombers. Engaging a Dornier Do-17 or Heinkel He-111 required sustained, accurate fire. These weren't dogfighting encounters demanding split-second deflection shots. Bomber interception meant positioning behind the target, closing to effective range, and holding the trigger down for 3 or 4 second bursts while aiming at specific vulnerable points. The Hurricane's solid gun platform gave pilots those extra fractions of a second of accurate fire. Compressed air cylinders feeding the guns rarely jammed. The electrical firing system proved reliable. Pilots could count on all 8 guns functioning. The Hurricane's slightly lower top speed, 325 miles per hour, versus the Spitfire's 365, actually proved irrelevant in combat. German bombers cruised at 180 to 200 miles per hour. Any Hurricane could catch them easily. Everything German intelligence interpreted as weakness was actually strength perfectly matched to the mission. They devaluated the Hurricane as a fighter versus fighter aircraft and found it wanting. They never realized it was purpose-built for killing bombers. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park understood his tactical advantage perfectly. His sector controllers received standing instructions that became devastatingly effective. When radar detected incoming raids, scramble Spitfire squadrons to engage high-flying fighter escorts. Direct Hurricane squadrons toward the bomber formations below. This doctrine exploited German tunnel vision brilliantly. Luftwaffe bomber crews expected Britain's best fighters, the Spitfires, they'd been warned about, to attack them. Instead, those Spitfires were busy 3,000 feet above, tangling with Messerschmitt Bf 109s, while Hurricanes tore into the bombers virtually unopposed. August 13th, Adler Tag. Eagle Day. German planners launched coordinated attacks expecting to overwhelm fighter command through sheer numbers. When Dornier Du 17s approached Eastchurch escorted by Bf 110s, No. 74 Squadron's Spitfires climbed to intercept the escorts, while No. 111 Squadron's Hurricanes positioned below the bomber stream. The Dorniers, stripped of their protective screen, faced sustained Hurricane attacks. 7 bombers went down. The surviving crews reported fierce Spitfire opposition. They'd misidentified their attackers completely. This misidentification pattern repeated constantly. German bomber crews, briefed extensively about Spitfire capabilities, often reported Spitfire attacks regardless of which British fighter actually engaged them. The psychological effect worked in fighter command's favor. Every encounter reinforced German assumptions about where the real threat lay. Squadron leader Tom Gleave developed No. 253 Squadron into specialist bomber destroyers. He drilled his pilots on approach angles that minimized exposure to defensive fire while maximizing time on target. Attack from slightly below and behind. Close to 300 yards. Aim for the engines. His squadron claimed 63 confirmed victories during the battle, predominantly bombers. By late August, this tactical doctrine had crystallized into fighter command's standard operating procedure. Every controller understood the principle, every squadron knew its primary role, and German intelligence still focused obsessively on Spitfires, never grasping that their bombers were being systematically destroyed by the fighter they dismissed as secondary. August 18, 1940, the hardest day. German planners committed everything coordinated strikes against Kenley, Beacon Hill, and the vital sector stations defending London. When Dornier Du 17s approached Kenley at low level that afternoon, they expected to crater runways and destroy Park Spitfires. Instead, No. 60 for Squadron's Hurricanes caught them during their bombing run. Flying officer Michael Crossley led his section straight into the bomber formation. 8 Hurricanes, 96 machine guns converging. 3 Dorniers shredded before their escorts could react. The bombers scattered, their bombing accuracy ruined. Simultaneously, No. 56 Squadron engaged a massive formation of Junkers Ru-88s targeting Manston. Squadron leader Minton commanded his 12 Hurricanes through textbook attacks. Diving passes from the sun, 3-second bursts into bomber engines. 5 Ru-88s went down in 10 minutes. German survivors reported overwhelming Spitfire attacks. Flight Lieutenant James Nicholson, flying Hurricanes with No. 249 Squadron, discovered the aircraft's resilience on August 16 when a Bf 110 hit his aircraft. Fire erupted around the cockpit, flames seared his hands and face. Instead of bailing out, Nicholson held his position, lined up his Hurricane's guns, and fired until the Messerschmitt spun earthward. The Hurricane absorbed punishment that would have destroyed lesser aircraft, giving him those crucial seconds to complete his attack. For this action, Nicholson received the Victoria Crossfighter Command's only VC of the entire battle. He flew a Hurricane. September 7 shifted German strategy dramatically. Hitler ordered mass attacks on London itself. Göring assembled enormous formations, 300 bombers escorted by 600 fighters. No. 303 Polish Squadron, flying Hurricanes from Northolt, tore into a Dornier formation with fury born from their nation's conquest. They claimed 16 confirmed kills that afternoon. September 15th Battle of Britain Day saw the climax. German intelligence promised Göring that fighter command was finished, they were catastrophically wrong. When 200 bombers approached London that morning, they met coordinated attacks from 23 squadrons. Hurricane squadrons bore the brunt of the fighting. Number 229 Squadron claimed 14 aircraft destroyed. Number 1 Squadron accounted for another 9. By day's end, the Luftwaffe had lost 60 aircraft. The majority fell to hurricane fire. German crews staggered back to French airfields, shocked by the ferocious opposition. Göring raged at his intelligence staff. They'd been counting Spitfires while hurricanes destroyed the Luftwaffe. When the Battle of Britain officially ended on October 31, 1940, the Air Ministry's verification process compiled statistics. The numbers took months to finalize, cross-referencing pilot claims with wreckage locations, German records, and observer reports. Every claim required substantial evidence. The final accounting delivered numbers that shocked even fighter command's own analysts. Between July 10 and October 31, hurricane squadrons destroyed 1,593 German aircraft. Spitfire squadrons accounted for 1,043 kills. The aircraft German intelligence had dismissed as obsolete had achieved 53% more victories than the fighter they'd obsessed over destroying. These weren't propaganda figures. The Air Ministry's meticulous verification process ensured accuracy. During August 1940, the battle's bloodiest month, hurricanes destroyed 512 German aircraft, while Spitfires claimed 308. Even during September's desperate defense of London, hurricanes consistently delivered higher kill tallies. Individual squadron records told the same story. Number 303 Polish Squadron claimed 126 confirmed victories, the highest scoring squadron of the entire conflict. Number 17 Squadron claimed 61. Number 85 Squadron tallied 52. Compare these to top Spitfire squadrons. Number 74 Squadron claimed 38 victories. The highest scoring Spitfire squadron barely matched average Hurricane squadron performance. Analysis of confirmed kills showed hurricanes accounted for the majority of bomber losses. Dornier Do-17s, Heinkel He-111s, and Junkers Ru-88s. These were the aircraft actually threatening British cities and industry. Spitfire victories skewed heavily toward fighters Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Bf-110s. This reflected exactly how fighter command deployed each type, and it highlighted the fundamental flaw in German strategy. They'd focused on eliminating the fighter that engaged their escorts while ignoring the fighter that was systematically destroying their bombers. The aircraft Göring barely bothered targeting had inflicted the majority of his losses. German intelligence failures began with fundamental methodological problems. Luftwaffe reconnaissance photographed airfields throughout the battle, counting parked aircraft. Analysts could distinguish Spitfires from hurricanes. Yet their assessment process contained a critical flaw. They assumed aircraft visibility correlated with operational importance. Spitfires, with their all-metal construction, photographed more clearly than fabric-covered hurricanes. This created an optical illusion in intelligence reports, making Spitfire numbers appear more significant than they actually were. The Luftwaffe's intelligence branch compounded these errors through confirmation bias. Once analysts concluded Spitfires represented the primary threat, they interpreted all subsequent data through that lens. When reconnaissance showed both aircraft types at Kenley, analysts marked it as a Spitfire station despite 12 Hurricanes and only 9 Spitfires being present. German propaganda inadvertently poisoned their own intelligence assessments. When early engagements with Spitfires proved challenging, propaganda portrayed Spitfires as exceptional aircraft, worthy opponents for the Messerschmitt Bf-109. This propaganda line fed back into intelligence assessments. Hurricanes, barely mentioned in propaganda, faded from analytical focus. Göring himself declared repeatedly that Britain possessed perhaps 300 front-line fighters total. When his intelligence staff presented evidence of larger numbers, he dismissed it as British deception. This top-down pressure meant analysts learned to present findings that matched command expectations. The failure to interrogate captured British pilots properly represented another missed opportunity. Dozens of RAF pilots were shot down and captured, yet Luftwaffe interrogators focused their questions on Spitfire performance. They rarely asked about Hurricanes specifically. When pilots mentioned flying Hurricanes, interrogators treated it as confirmation the prisoner came from a second-line unit. German signals intelligence monitored British radio communications throughout the battle, intercepting thousands of transmissions. These intercepts clearly showed Hurricane squadrons operating as frequently as Spitfire units. Yet analysts filtered this intelligence through their existing assumptions, consistently underweighting Hurricane references while highlighting any Spitfire mentions. Perhaps most damningly, Luftwaffe intelligence never conducted effective post-battle damage assessment. Bomber crews reporting their attackers said Spitfires, and intelligence accepted that uncritically. No one cross-referenced these reports with British squadron deployments or questioned why Spitfire attacks clustered in areas where Hurricane squadrons were actually stationed. The historical correction began quietly in the 1960s when researchers gained access to comprehensive combat records sealed under official secrets regulations. Dennis Richards, working on the official RAF history, discovered the discrepancy between public perception and documented reality. His 1974 volume presented the numbers plainly: 1,593 Hurricane victories versus 1,043 Spitfire victories. Surviving Hurricane pilots began speaking more forcefully about their experiences. Peter Townsend's memoir, published in 1970, addressed the recognition disparity directly. He noted that Hurricane pilots had learned to accept their secondary status in public memory, but that acceptance didn't make the historical injustice correct. When the RAF Museum opened at Hendon in 1972, its Battle of Britain exhibition gave Hurricane and Spitfire equal prominence. Curators displayed Hurricane combat records alongside the aircraft itself. Visitors reading the statistics came away understanding its actual importance. The 50th anniversary commemorations in 1990 marked a turning point. Official ceremonies explicitly honored Hurricane contributions. The Queen Mother visited Hurricane Squadron memorial events. Press coverage finally acknowledged that Britain's defense had rested primarily on Sidney Cam's sturdy fighter rather than R.J. Mitchell's elegant one. Modern aviation enthusiasts now understand the Hurricane's crucial role. The RAV's official position acknowledges Hurricane dominance unambiguously. When the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight displays both aircraft types at public events, commentators emphasize that the Hurricane did the majority of the fighting. October 31, 1940, Tangmere Aerodrome. Flight Lieutenant David Moore climbed down from his Hurricane for the last combat sortie of the battle. 127 operational hours. 43 combat engagements, 9 confirmed kills. His aircraft bore 63 patched bullet holes across its fabric-covered fuselage. The aircraft that German intelligence had dismissed as obsolete would continue fighting across North Africa, Burma, and Russia. It would remain in front-line service until 1944, long after analysts had predicted its retirement. Moore never spoke much about his victories. When people asked what he'd flown, he'd say Hurricane and watch their faces flicker with faint disappointment. They wanted to hear Spitfire. They wanted the glamour, the legend, the icon. He understood. Some truths take decades to emerge from shadows. The historical irony remains striking. German intelligence focused obsessively on destroying an aircraft that accounted for roughly 40% of their losses while virtually ignoring the aircraft that destroyed 60%. The Hurricane, dismissed as obsolete by enemies and overshadowed by glamour and friendly propaganda, quietly won Britain's most crucial air battle. History eventually recognized the truth, though it took half a century. The sturdy fighter that German analysts underestimated, that British propaganda undersold, that popular memory nearly forgot, now stands properly acknowledged as the true defender of Britain's skies in 1940.